The pain was something I'll never forget. I felt the boiling liquid run down my arm, burning every inch of skin it touched. The bowl fell from my hands and shattered into 1,000 pieces on the floor, but the sound of the breaking dishes was completely drowned out by the laughter that erupted throughout the dining room. Loud, cruel laughter came from all directions. My daughter-in-law Jennifer was practically hunched over the table, holding her stomach as she laughed, as if this were the most hilarious thing she'd ever witnessed. Her friends, those people with perfectly made-up faces and expensive clothes I'd never seen before, were also laughing without the slightest embarrassment. Some tried to hide it by putting their hands over their mouths, but their shoulders were shaking with laughter. And there, sitting at the head of the table, my son Michael stared at his plate, his face completely red. But it wasn't red with anger at the way his mother was being treated. It was red with shame. Shame of me. Jennifer rose from her chair with that wicked smile I had learned to recognize so well. She walked over to where I stood, still paralyzed by pain and humiliation, and bent down close to my ear. So close I could feel her warm breath on my skin. And then she whispered with a coldness that froze me inside, words that would be etched in my soul forever. "You are pathetic. Nothing but a useless burden no one here wants around. And you know what's worse, Margaret? Even your own son is ashamed of you. Look at him. Look closely. He's dying of shame, not of me, but of you." I slowly raised my eyes, searching my son's gaze, silently begging him to say something, anything, to defend me, to stop this torture. But Michael kept looking down, unable to meet my eyes, unable to defend me. In that moment, feeling the skin on my arm burn and seeing my son choose silence, something inside me shattered. But what none of them knew, what Jennifer, with all her arrogance and cruelty, couldn't even imagine, was that I still held the power to silence them all. And sooner or later, when the time was right, I would use that power to reclaim everything they'd taken from me, my dignity, my respect, and my life. If you've made it this far, you've probably recognized that families aren't always what we imagine. Right here on this channel, you'll find a safe space where real stories like mine are told without judgment. These stories will move you, make you reflect, and perhaps even help you better understand your own family experiences. Subscribe to the channel and be part of this community where every story matters and where you're always welcome. Because we all have our stories, we all have our struggles, and together we are stronger. Now I'm going to tell you all the details of this experience that changed my life forever. Get ready, because what you're about to hear will make you question many things about family love and how far we should go for those we love. My name is Margaret Sullivan. I'm 62 years old, and for most of my life, I've firmly believed I was building a strong, close-knit, and loving family. When my son Michael was born on a cold January day in 1993, I was only 22 and completely alone in the world. His father, a man who promised to love me forever, abandoned us 3 months before the birth when he discovered I was pregnant. He simply disappeared, leaving only a note saying he wasn't ready to be a father. I remember as if it were yesterday, the day I held Michael in my arms for the first time. I looked into that perfect little face, those barely open blue eyes, and made a solemn promise. I promised he would never experience the hardships I'd endured, never want for anything, never question whether he was loved. And for 30 years, I kept that promise with every fiber of my being. We lived in a tiny apartment in Boston, Massachusetts, in a neighborhood that wasn't exactly the safest in the city. I worked 2 jobs to make ends meet. During the day, from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., I worked as a cashier at the local supermarket. The pay was meager, barely covering the rent, but I had a significant benefit. I could take home groceries that were close to their expiration date at a discount. That's how we managed to survive the first few years. At night, after putting Michael to bed with the elderly neighbor, who would babysit for a few hours, I would clean offices downtown. From 10 p.m. to 5 a.m., I vacuumed, cleaned bathrooms, and emptied trash cans, all to ensure my son had a better life than I had. Sleep was a luxury I rarely had. I'd nap a few hours here and there, but most of the time I was on autopilot, driven only by the love I felt for that boy. Michael was a brilliant child. Even though he attended poorly funded public schools, he always earned top grades. His teachers constantly called me to tell him he had a promising future ahead of him. That, with the right opportunities, he could go far. And I did everything I could to give him those opportunities. When he was 12, he discovered a natural talent for math and science. One of the teachers suggested he participate in a special weekend program for gifted children. But the program cost $500 a semester. It was a fortune for me at the time, but I found a way. I started doing extra cleaning on weekends, sacrificing the only free time I had to ensure Michael could participate. It was worth every tired minute when I saw the smile on his face as he received his certificate of completion. During high school, Michael excelled even more. His grades were impeccable. He participated in every science competition and won awards. When it came time to consider college, I knew I needed a financial miracle. The universities he wanted were expensive, very expensive, and even with scholarships, we would still need money for housing, books, and basic expenses. That's when I started saving obsessively. I cut out all unnecessary expenses. I stopped buying new clothes for myself, wearing the same items until they were completely worn out. I ate less so there would be more food left for Michael. I canceled my only luxury, my cable TV subscription. Every penny I had left went straight into a savings account dedicated to my son's education. I saved like this for 5 years. 5 years of extreme sacrifice. But when Michael received his acceptance letter to the engineering school with a partial scholarship covering 60% of the costs, I had $23,000 saved. It wasn't enough for the full 4 years, but it was a start. I cried with joy when he opened that letter. My son, my baby, was going to be the first in my family to get a college education. The 4 years of college were the hardest financially. Besides the $23,000 I had saved, I had to take out personal loans, worked overtime whenever possible, and sold most of the few valuables I owned. My mother's jewelry, the only things I had left of hers after she passed away when I was 19, was sold one by one. First her graduation ring, then her pearl earrings, finally the necklace she wore on special occasions. Each sale was like ripping out a piece of my history, but Michael needed books, a new computer, and money for academic projects. And I never let him know how much I was sacrificing. I always told him it was okay not to worry, to just focus on my studies. By the end of my 4th year, I had spent about $57,000 on his education, between savings, loans, and sales. Michael graduated with honors at the top of his class. The graduation ceremony was one of the happiest days of my life. Seeing my son in cap and gown, holding that diploma, knowing everything I'd sacrificed to get there made every sleepless night worthwhile. He hugged me tightly after the ceremony and whispered in my ear that it was all thanks to me, that he'd never forget everything I'd done for him. I treasured those words. 3 months after graduation, Michael received an incredible job offer. A tech company in Austin, Texas, hired him as a junior engineer with a starting salary of $75,000 a year. It was more money than I'd earned in 5 years working my 2 jobs. I was so proud I could barely hold back the tears every time I thought about it. My son had made it. He'd escaped poverty. He'd built a better future. Everything I dreamed for him was coming true. I helped Michael move to Austin, paying for the Complity. I told Michael move to Explai Despreza. And if my questionable ingredients, if you're using like a scanner app and it's like a love, like, luck, look at this. I called to like slosh sport. I call it love at least twice. And we all know I've been exploring that. I culp to like Michael move to a Lustin complies. I come wide to a lot of complied. I come like to see some of a lust of lies. I can cane me so a condui. I can wee you for we kiwe, come why at we weed with fifth do we sigh with consin we to cook a kalidika with a kanida you can I side a we can you seek to so basic furnishings for the apartment he rented and giving him $3,000 to get started. Money I'd borrowed from a friend because my savings were completely depleted after paying for college. But I didn't care. It was an investment in his future, and I knew he would soon be established and no longer need my help. It was 6 months after the move that Michael called me to say he'd met someone special. Her name was Jennifer Thompson. She worked in the marketing department at the same company, and according to him, she was the most incredible woman he'd ever met. He spoke of her with such enthusiasm, such a sparkle in his voice that I was genuinely happy for him. He deserved to find someone, build a family, be happy. I met Jennifer in person 2 months later when I went to visit Michael in Austin for the first time. I took a bus that took 24 hours because I couldn't afford a plane ticket, but I didn't tell him that. I said I preferred to travel by bus to enjoy the scenery. Jennifer was beautiful in a way that immediately intimidated me. Tall, blonde, with the kind of polished beauty that comes from expensive salons and designer clothes. Her handshake was too firm, almost aggressive, and her smile didn't reach her eyes. But what bothered me most was the way she looked around Michael's simple apartment, as if evaluating and judging every detail. During the dinner I prepared for the three of them that first night, she barely touched her food. I made a special roast, a recipe Michael had always loved as a child, but Jennifer just poked at it with her fork and said she was trying to cut down on carbs. The way she said it, the slightly dismissive tone, made me uncomfortable. But I pushed those thoughts away. I didn't want to be that kind of mother who never approves of her son's girlfriend. Maybe I was being overly sensitive, seeing problems where none existed. Michael was clearly in love, and who was I to judge? During that weekend, I tried to connect with Jennifer. I asked about her family, her work, her interests. She responded in monosyllables, clearly bored with the conversation. I offered to go shopping together, just the two of us, a chance to get to know each other better. She politely declined, saying she had plans with friends. I tried not to feel rejected, but the feeling lingered, nagging. On the last day of the visit, while Michael was in the shower, Jennifer came into the kitchen where I was washing the dishes. She stood in the doorway for a moment before speaking, and when she did, her voice had a coldness that made me stop scrubbing the plate. "Margaret, I know you and Michael are very close, but he's a grown man now. He needs space to build his own life. I hope you understand that, and don't be too present." The words hit me like a slap in the face. To present me, who had just traveled 24 hours by bus to spend a weekend with my son, me, who had barely seen him since he moved. I swallowed my anger and responded as calmly as I could. "Of course, Jennifer. I only want the best for Michael." She smiled, but it was a cold, calculated smile. "Great. Then we understand each other." I returned to Boston with a heavy heart, but I tried to convince myself I was just being an overprotective mother. After all mothers struggle when their children find partners, don't they? It was normal to feel a little jealous, a little afraid of losing my place in his life. In time, things would improve. Or so I thought. Michael and Jennifer began dating seriously, and his calls to me began to become more spaced out. We used to talk at least 3 times a week, but gradually it dwindled to once a week, then once every 2 weeks. When I called, he often said he was busy and would call me back later, but he rarely did. When we finally did talk, I felt a distance that hadn't existed before. He seemed distracted, rushing to end the call. He always mentioned Jennifer, what they were doing together, the places they were going. I tried to rejoice in the fact that he was happy, but part of me missed my son, the closeness we'd always had. A year after they started dating, Michael called me with news. "Mom, I'm going to ask Jennifer to marry me. I want you to know first before anyone else." My heart clenched with a confusing mix of joy and sadness. Joy because my son had found someone he wanted to spend his whole life with. Sadness because I knew on some deep level that this meant I was losing him in a way I would never get back. But I swallowed those feelings and said what a mother should say. "I'm so happy for you, Michael." "Did she say yes?" He laughed. "I haven't asked yet, Mom. I'll ask next weekend. I just wanted you to be the first to know about my plans." That warmed my heart. Even with the distance, even with Jennifer, I was still important to him. I was still the first person he thought to share his big news with. Jennifer accepted the proposal, of course, and wedding preparations began. When Michael called me to discuss the details, I immediately offered to help financially. I knew weddings were expensive, and I wanted to contribute in any way I could. I'd managed to save a little over the course of that year, about $5,000. It wasn't much, but it was what I could offer. Michael seemed genuinely touched. "Mom, are you sure? I know money is tight for you." I'm sure. It's my only son's wedding. I want to help. I transferred the $5,000 a few days later. Jennifer sent me a short text thanking me without much detail or warmth. Michael sent me a separate message saying how much it meant to him, how much he loved me. I saved that message and reread it whenever I felt lonely. The wedding was set for 6 months later on a date in the fall. It would be a small ceremony in Austin with just close family and close friends. I started planning for the trip, saving every penny so I could buy a pretty dress and pay for the plane ticket. This time I wanted to fly. I didn't want to arrive exhausted from a bus ride to my son's wedding. 3 months before the wedding, Jennifer called me. It was the first time she'd called me directly since they'd met, and I was surprised to see her name on my phone screen. "Margaret, I need to talk to you about the wedding." "Of course, dear." "What do you need?" she sighed dramatically. "It's just that the costs are so much higher than we expected. The venue we want, the catering, the flowers, everything is more expensive than we planned. Michael and I were talking and thought I'd ask if you could help a little more." My stomach sank. I'd already given the $5,000 I'd saved and was struggling to save for my own trip. "How much do you need?" "Well, if you could contribute another $10,000, that would be perfect." "10,000, Jennifer, I don't have that kind of money. I've already given everything I had saved." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy, tinged with disapproval. "I understand. I just thought you'd like to contribute more significantly to your son's wedding." "But that's okay. We'll find another way." The way she said it, as if I was being selfish or petty for not having $10,000 saved, made me feel small and inadequate. "I'm sorry, Jennifer. If I had, I would." She hung up shortly after without much ceremony. I sat with the phone in my hand, feeling terrible. Was I really being selfish? Should I find a way to get more money to help? I ended up doing just that. I went to the bank and got a personal loan for $8,000. The interest rate was high and the payments would strain my already tight budget, but it was my son's wedding. I deserved to have the perfect day I'd dreamed of. I called Michael and told him I'd gotten more money to help. The happiness in his voice made me feel like I'd made the right choice, even though I knew it would take years to pay off the loan. The wedding day finally arrived. I flew to Austin the day before, staying in a cheap hotel near the airport because the hotels near the wedding venue were incredibly expensive. I bought a beautiful dress from a department store, navy blue, elegant but understated. I wanted to look good, but I didn't want to outshine the bride in any way. The ceremony was beautiful, I have to admit. The hall was decorated with white and gold flowers, a string quartet played classical music, and Jennifer looked stunning in a wedding dress that probably cost more than I'd make in 6 months. Michael looked gorgeous in his tuxedo, and when he said his vows crying as he looked at Jennifer, my heart swelled with love for him. During the reception, I was seated at a table in the corner of the hall away from the head table where Michael and Jennifer were. At my table were some of Jennifer's distant cousins who barely spoke to me. I tried to make conversation, but it was clear they preferred to talk amongst themselves. I spent most of the reception sitting alone watching my son from afar, wishing I could be closer to him on this special day. When it came time for the speeches, Jennifer's father gave a long emotional toast. Several of Michael's friends spoke, but no one called on me to speak. No one mentioned the groom's mother, the woman who raised him alone, who sacrificed everything for him. It was as if I were invisible. After the reception, I went to say goodbye to Michael before heading back to the hotel. He hugged me tightly, still half drunk with champagne and happiness. "I love you, Mom. Thank you for everything. I love you to my son. Be happy." Jennifer stood beside him, watching our embrace with an expression I couldn't decipher. When I pulled away from Michael, she gave me a quick, formal hug. "Thank you for coming, Margaret." Flew back to Boston the next day, feeling a deep loneliness I couldn't explain. I should have been happy. My son was happy. He had found love. He was starting a new chapter in his life. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had lost something important, something I would never get back. The first few months after the wedding were relatively quiet. Michael called occasionally, always in a hurry, always with Jennifer in the background. The conversations were superficial about work and the weather, nothing too deep. I missed the long conversations we used to have where he would tell me about his dreams and fears, where I could truly understand what was going on in his life. 6 months after the wedding, Michael called me with news. Mom, Jennifer and I are looking to buy a house. We want to move out of the apartment and have our own place. My heart swelled with joy. How wonderful, Michael. I'm so happy for you. Yes, we're excited. But there's a problem. We found the perfect house, but it's a little over our budget. We need help with the down payment. I immediately felt a chill run down my spine. Michael had never asked me directly before. It had always been through Jennifer or indirectly. How much do you need? If you could help with about $30,000 for the down payment, we could close the deal. The house is incredible, Mom. 4 bedrooms, a huge yard, and a great neighborhood. It's where we want to raise our future children. The mention of future grandchildren softened my heart. Imagining Michael as a father, imagining little grandchildren playing in that yard he described was a beautiful dream. But $30,000 was practically all I had managed to save again after paying for the wedding. It was my emergency fund, my safety net. Michael, this is all the money I've saved. It's my emergency fund. There was a heavy silence on the other end. I understand. Forget it then. I just thought you'd like to invest in our future, but that's okay. Guilt hit me like a wave. He'd used the word investment. He wasn't asking for a gift. He was offering me an opportunity to invest in his future, in the future of my future grandchildren. And was I being selfish by holding on to this money when I could be helping my son realize his dream of owning a home? Wait, Michael, let me think about it. Can I call you tomorrow? Sure, Mom. But it needs to be quick. The house won't be available for long. I stayed up all night weighing the pros and cons. On one hand, that money was my security, my protection against emergencies. On the other, it was my son asking for help building his future. In the end, love won out over logic. I called Michael the next morning and told him I'd transfer the money. The happiness in his voice made it seem like I'd made the right decision. I transferred the $30,000 a few days later, watching my bank account drop to almost zero. Jennifer sent a short thank you message. Michael called thrilled, saying she was the best mother in the world, that he would never forget this. And that as soon as their financial situation improved, they would return the money. I clung to that promise like a lifeline. They bought the house, a beautiful property I'd only seen in pictures because I couldn't afford a plane ticket to visit. Michael sent photos, constantly excited about every detail. The spacious garden, the modern kitchen, the spacious bedrooms. I was genuinely happy for them. A few months after the purchase, Jennifer called me again. Margaret, we need to do some urgent renovations on the house. The kitchen is in terrible condition. The cabinets are falling apart, and we discovered a leak in the roof. That needs to be fixed immediately. How much would it be? She sighed dramatically. The quote we got was $15,000. I know it's a lot, but these are essential repairs. We can't live like this. Jennifer, I just gave you $30,000. I don't have that money anymore. Another heavy silence. Margaret, I know it's a lot to ask, but couldn't you take out a loan? Or use your house as collateral? These are necessary renovations, not luxuries. The house you helped me buy will depreciate if we don't make these repairs. The way she phrased it, as if it were my responsibility, as if the house were partly mine, confused me. Michael then joined the call. Mom, I know it's a lot. But Jennifer's right. We need to make these renovations. The house has serious problems. And we thought that since you helped us buy it, you'd like to protect your investment. By helping with the renovations. Word again, investment. As if I were their partner in the house, not simply the mother who helped her son. But their logic made sense in a way. If the house depreciated due to lack of maintenance, the money I'd given would be for nothing. I'll see what I can do. I went to the bank and, after much negotiation, got a loan using my own modest home as collateral. The house where I had raised Michael, where every room held precious memories, was now serving as collateral for his renovation. I transferred the $15,000, and this time I didn't even get a thank you call, just a short text from Jennifer. Michael called me a few days later, but he didn't mention the money, just chatted about work and the weather. It was as if the $15,000 transfer was something so insignificant it didn't even deserve recognition. I started to feel a twinge of resentment for the first time, but I quickly pushed it away. No, Margaret, I told myself. Don't be that mother who keeps score of favors. You helped because you love your son, not to receive gratitude in return." The following months established a worrying pattern. Every few months there was a new emergency, a new financial need. Jennifer's car broke down and they needed $5,000 to fix it. They had credit card debt they needed to pay off before the interest became unmanageable, $8,000. They wanted to replace the living room furniture because the ones they had were old and didn't match the new house. Another $6,000. And every time I hesitated, every time I asked if it was really necessary, Michael would appear with that tone of disappointment in his voice that made me feel terrible. "I thought you cared about us, Mom. I thought you wanted the best for us. You used to say you'd do anything for me." And I did. I was doing it. But with each new request, each new loan I had to take out, I felt my financial situation worsening. I was paying off 3 different loans, now the payments consuming almost half my income. I had to pick up more hours at work, taking on extra shifts that my 60-year-old body was starting to feel. I came home exhausted every night, barely having the energy to eat before falling into bed. But I convinced myself it was temporary, that once they settled down, things would get better. 2 years after they bought the house, Michael called me with the news that would change everything. "Mom, I have incredible news. Jennifer is pregnant. You're going to be a grandmother." All the financial worries, all the exhaustion, everything disappeared in that moment. I'm going to be a grandmother. I'm going to have a grandson or a granddaughter. Tears of joy streamed down my face as I congratulated Michael repeatedly. Finally, I thought, finally things will get better. A baby brings families back together, creates new bonds, new connections. Jennifer will need me now. She'll see that I'm useful, that I can help in ways that money can't. I immediately began planning how I could help. I started researching cribs and strollers. I wanted to buy the best of everything for my future grandson. When I shared this with Michael, he was thrilled. "You're the best mom and you'll be the best grandmother," he said. Over the next few months, I spent over $10,000 on baby supplies. A Topoflin crib with all the safety certifications. An imported stroller that Jennifer had mentioned wanting. Clothes, blankets, toys, children's books. Every purchase was made with love, imagining my future grandson using those things. 2 months before the due date, I offered to come to Austin to help. "I can stay for a few months, help with the baby, cook, clean, whatever you need." Jennifer accepted, but in a way that made me feel more like a hired help than a beloved grandmother. "It would be helpful to have someone to do the housework while I recover. You can stay in the guest room." I flew to Austin a week before my due date, bringing more gifts and a suitcase full of expectations. Their house was beautiful, with all the renovations my money had paid for. The modern kitchen, the well-kept garden, the elegant furniture. I felt a pang of pride thinking I had helped create this home where my grandson would grow up. But I soon realized my role there wasn't quite what I imagined. Jennifer handed me a to-do list on the first day. "I need you to do the shopping today, clean the bathrooms, do the laundry, and cook dinner. I have a very busy day working remotely." There was no please, no acknowledgement that I had traveled to help as a grandmother, not as a housekeeper. But I swallowed my discomfort and did everything she asked. It was for the baby's sake, to help my son. My granddaughter Emily was born on a rainy October morning. It was the happiest day of my life since Michael's birth. When I held her for the first time, looking at that perfect little face, I knew every sacrifice, every dollar spent, every hour of extra work had been worth it. This little girl was my blood. My family and I would do anything for her. I stayed in Austin for the first month of Emily's life, and those were the most intense days I'd ever experienced. I'd wake up at dawn when she cried so Jennifer could rest. I changed diapers, bathed her, rocked Emily to sleep. I cooked every meal, cleaned the entire house, and went grocery shopping. Jennifer spent most of the day in her room resting or on the phone with friends while I took care of everything. Michael worked long hours and would come home exhausted, eat the dinner I'd made, and go straight to his room. We rarely had time to talk, to truly connect. When it was time to return to Boston, Jennifer made a request that would completely change my life. "Margaret, since you don't have much going on in your life back in Boston, why don't you move here permanently? It would be so helpful to have you around." To help with Emily, the way she said it as if my entire life were empty and purposeless, as if my only function was to Serve them should have warned me. But the thought of being close to Emily, of seeing every stage of her growth, of being a constant presence in her life was irresistible. Michael enthusiastically supported the idea. It would be amazing to have you around, Mom. Emily needs her grandmother, and we definitely need the help. I felt my heart swell with love and hope. Yes, I would move. I would be close to my family, I would be useful, I would be loved and appreciated. Or so I thought. I returned to Boston and made a decision that would change everything. I put my house up for sale. That modest little house in a working-class neighborhood of Boston where I had raised Michael alone, where every room held precious memories. The bedroom where Michael took his first steps. The kitchen where we made breakfast together before school. The living room where we watched movies curled up on the couch on weekends. Every inch of that house was steeped in our history. But I was willing to leave all that behind for a chance to be close to my family. The house quickly sold for $180,000. After paying off the remaining mortgage and the loans I had taken out, I had $105,000 left. It was all the equity I had accumulated in 60 years of life. I bought a small apartment in Austin, a 20-minute drive from Michael and Jennifer's house, for $53,000 cash. It was modest, just one bedroom, but it was mine, and I'd be close to my family. That was all that mattered. When I told Jennifer about the money left over from the sale, $52,000 after buying the apartment, she had a suggestion. Margaret, why don't you put this money in a joint account with us? That way it would be family money available for emergencies. After all, we're family now. I hesitated. That money was literally all I had in the world. But Jennifer's logic made sense on the surface. We were family, and families shared resources, didn't they? Plus, I had access to the account and could monitor how it was being used. I agreed and transferred the $52,000 to a joint account with Michael and Jennifer. It was the biggest mistake of my life, and I would realize it too late. The first few months in Austin were the happiest I'd had in years. I saw Emily every day, watched every little milestone. The first time she smiled at me, my heart melted. When she started crawling, I was there to see it. Every laugh, every new discovery, I was there for it all. But slowly, very slowly, I realized that my role in Michael and Jennifer's home wasn't exactly that of a beloved and respected grandmother. It was that of an unpaid maid. Jennifer began giving me daily to-do lists. Margaret, today, I need you to clean the bathrooms, iron the clothes, do the shopping. And prepare dinner for 6 because we're having guests. Oh, and can you give Emily a bath and put her to bed? I'll be too busy getting ready for guests. There was never a please or a thank you. They were orders, not requests. And Michael, who used to defend me or at least acknowledge when something was wrong, simply accepted everything. He'd come home from work, eat the meal I'd prepared, play with Emily for a few minutes, and then disappear into the office or go to sleep. It was as if my constant presence had become so normal it was invisible. I began noticing strange movements in the joint account. Large withdrawals I hadn't authorized, transfers to other accounts. When I asked Jennifer about an $80,000 withdrawal, she looked at me as if I were being absurdly invasive. Margaret, it's a family account. We use it for family expenses. You don't have to question every transaction. But when I looked at the statements more closely, in the rare moments I had access to their computer, I saw that. These family expenses included things like a $12,000 trip to Cancun, 16th designer furniture for Jennifer's office designer, clothes and jewelry. None of this had been discussed with me. None of this was a family emergency. In less than a year, they had spent nearly $40,000 of the money in the account, my money. When I tried to talk to Michael about it, choosing a time when we were alone, he exploded in a way I'd never seen before. Are you controlling our lives now, Mom? Don't you trust us anymore? Can't you just be happy to be part of the family without policing every penny? I was speechless. Part of the family, I had given them nearly $200,000 over the years. I had changed my entire life, sold my house, left everything I knew behind. And she was being accused of not being part of the family, of being controlling by questioning the use of my own money. Things took a turn for the worse after that conversation. Jennifer began setting absurd rules for my visits. You can only come between 2 and 5 p.m. on weekdays. You have to give at least a day's notice. You can no longer hold Emily without asking permission first. Each rule was a stab in the heart. But the worst was the way Jennifer began humiliating me in front of others. Once during an afternoon tea she organized with the neighbors in the condominium. She called me into the kitchen to get more cookies. When I returned with the platter, she examined it critically and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Margaret, these cookies look stale. Can't you do anything right? No wonder your husband abandoned you when he found out you were pregnant." The words hit me like punches. She had just exposed the most painful part of my life, the abandonment. I suffered when I needed support the most, and she was using it to humiliate me in front of strangers. The neighbors laughed nervously, clearly uncomfortable, but not wanting to contradict their hostess. I felt tears burning in my eyes, but refused to cry in front of them. When I told Michael later about the incident, hoping he would finally see Jennifer's cruel behavior, he just sighed wearily. "Mom, you're overreacting again." Jennifer was just making a joke. You need to develop a sense of humor and stop being so sensitive. A joke humiliating me about his father who abandoned us was a joke, but Michael wouldn't listen. Jennifer found new creative ways to make me feel small and inadequate. She constantly criticized my outfit. "Margaret, can't you wear something more presentable? It's like you took that blouse out of the trash." She made comments about my weight. "Maybe you should eat less, Margaret. You're getting quite large." She commented on my hair, my skin, my speech, my posture. Nothing I did was right. And always in front of other people, always with that cruel smile that made it clear she was enjoying every second of my humiliation. I started having anxiety attacks. I'd wake up in the middle of the night with my heart racing in a cold sweat, unable to breathe properly. During the day, my hands would shake constantly. I lost weight because my stomach was constantly upset and I could barely eat. But I couldn't walk away because it would mean walking away from Emily, and she was the only light in my life. That beautiful little girl who ran into my arms when she saw me, who asked Grandma to read me stories, who drew me pictures with crayons. How could I abandon her when Emily was about to turn to Jennifer, announced she was throwing a big party to celebrate? "Margaret, I need you to come early on the day of the party to help with the preparations, like around 7 in the morning. And can you bring that chocolate cake you make, the one Michael always liked?" I agreed, as I always did. I arrived at their house at 7 in the morning on the Saturday of the party, carrying the cake I'd spent the night before making. Jennifer greeted me at the door wearing an expensive silk robe. She'd finally arrived. There was so much work to do. The list of tasks she gave me was absurd. Decorate the entire house, prepare trays of food for 50 people, clean every room, organize the garden area. Where the children would play, set the tables, inflate balloons. All while she sat in the living room getting her nails done and talking on the phone with friends. I worked nonstop from 7 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon when the first guests started arriving. I was exhausted, sweaty, with an aching back and swollen feet. But the house looked beautiful, I had to admit. Pink balloons everywhere, tables decorated with princess themes, food arranged on pretty trays. Everything ready for my granddaughter's perfect party. When the guests started arriving, Jennifer came to me with that fake smile. "Margaret, I think it's best if you stay in the kitchen during the party. We don't want you to be disruptive or embarrassing. There will be a lot of important people here." Her words cut me to the quick, but I nodded and went to the kitchen. I spent the next few hours there serving food and washing dishes, listening to the laughter and music coming from the garden. Every now and then, I'd peek out the window and see Emily playing, surrounded by other children, happy. At least she was having fun. At one point, I had to leave the kitchen to get more ice from the garage freezer. That's when I walked past the living room and heard Jennifer talking to a group of friends. One of them was asking about me. "Is that lady in the kitchen your mother Jennifer?" laughed. That cruel laugh I knew so well. God forbid. She's my mother-in-law. She has nothing else in her life, so she clings to us like a leech. Honestly, it's suffocating sometimes, but Michael feels sorry for her, so we let her stay. At least she's good for something. She does all the housework I don't want to do. Her friends laughed, some looking uncomfortable with the cruelty, but no one defended me. I stood frozen there in the living room entrance, holding onto the wall to keep from falling. Leech, she had called me a leech. I, the one who had given them nearly $200,000. I, the one who had sold my house, changed my entire life. I, the one who spent entire days taking care of her daughter while she went out with friends or stayed home doing nothing. I walked back into the kitchen with tears streaming silently down my face, my hands shaking so badly. I almost dropped the tray I was carrying. But I had to hold on. I couldn't fall apart there. Not at my granddaughter's party. The party ended at 7 o'clock. After the last guest left, Jennifer walked into the kitchen where I was still washing mountains of dishes. "You can go now, Margaret. Thanks for your help. Oh, and take those leftovers. See those trays of food nobody ate? I have no room in the fridge." I drove back to my apartment carrying bags of leftovers like a maid being paid with scraps. I got home and collapsed on the couch crying my eyes out. Had this become my life, being treated like a maid, constantly humiliated, called a leech after giving everything? I spent the entire Sunday in bed, unable to find the energy to do anything. Michael called me Monday night as if nothing had happened. "Hi, Mom, the party was great, wasn't it, Emily? Had a great time. Thanks for helping." I didn't even mention what Jennifer had said. What would be the point? He always took her side, always making me feel like I was overreacting or being too sensitive. In the following weeks, Jennifer escalated the humiliations even further. She began making cruel comments in front of Emily. "Grandma can't do anything right, can she, Emily? That's why she's alone." I was trying to teach Emily to disrespect me, to see me as inferior. One afternoon, when I picked Emily up from daycare because Jennifer said she was too busy, the teacher called me in for a chat. "Mrs. Sullivan, I need to talk to you about something Emily said today." My heart sank. What was it she said? Her mother said you were poor and pathetic? Obviously, that worried us. I wanted to make sure everything was okay in the family. I felt shame burn my face. I managed to stammer out some excuse and left as quickly as possible. When I confronted Jennifer later about teaching Emily to disrespect me, she just shrugged. "I'm just preparing my daughter for the real world, Margaret. Teaching her to recognize when people are successful and when they are failures. You are a perfect example of the failure I want her to avoid becoming." Every word was pure venom, but the worst was yet to come. 3 months after Emily's birthday party, Michael called me to say he and Jennifer were having a special dinner to celebrate a promotion he'd received. "I want you to come, Mom. It'll be special, a family celebration." My heart filled with hope. Maybe finally things were getting better. Maybe Michael was finally truly including me, treating me like family and not just an employee. I arrived at the appointed time with a bouquet of expensive flowers I could barely afford, and a bottle of wine that cost half my weekly food budget. I rang the doorbell excitedly, expecting an intimate dinner with my son, daughter-in-law, and granddaughter. The door opened and my smile froze. The house was full of people. Dozens of people I'd never seen before, all dressed elegantly, holding glasses of champagne, chatting animatedly. It wasn't a family dinner. It was a party, and I hadn't been warned. I was wearing a simple cotton dress while all the other women were wearing cocktail dresses and high heels. I looked like a homeless woman who'd wandered into the wrong place. Jennifer appeared in the doorway, looking me up and down with barely concealed contempt. "Margaret, you're here. Come in." Michael greeted me quickly, clearly having already had a few glasses of champagne, and waved me to a chair at the far corner of the dining table. "Sit there, Mom. I'll get you something to drink." I sat in that corner, completely out of place as the party unfolded around me. No one came to speak to me. No one included me in the conversation. It was as if I were a piece of furniture, something that was there but everyone ignored. When dinner time came, the table was set with sophisticated dishes and expensive wine. I recognized the food. It was from a fancy Italian restaurant in downtown Austin. They hadn't cooked anything. They'd ordered everything. I remembered the countless times I'd spent hours in the kitchen, preparing elaborate meals for them, and here they were spending hundreds of dollars on restaurant food to impress friends. Jennifer began serving the starter, a creamy butternut squash soup. She brought the bowls from the kitchen herself, personally handing them to each guest with a radiant smile. People complimented it, commented on how delicious it was, and Jennifer accepted the compliments as if she'd made it herself. When it was my turn, she placed the bowl in front of me with more force than necessary, causing a little liquid to slosh over the rim. "I made it especially for you, Margaret. I hope you like it." There was something threatening in her tone, but I ignored it. I picked up the spoon. I was hungry. I hadn't eaten since breakfast. But just as I was about to take the first spoonful, Jennifer bumped into me. On purpose. I saw that mischievous glint in her eyes a split second before she deliberately collided with my chair. The bowl completely tipped over in my lap. The soup was boiling. Literally boiling. I felt pain explode through my neck, my thighs, my arm, which instinctively went to protect my body. It was indescribable pain, as if my skin were being ripped off. Blisters began to form immediately. The bowl fell to the floor and shattered into dozens of pieces. And then it began. The laughter. Jennifer was the first, that loud, theatrical laugh. "Oh my God, how clumsy, you can't even hold a bowl of soup properly. Seriously." And the others followed. One by one, the guests began to laugh. Some seemed genuinely amused. Others laughed out of peer pressure, out of nervousness, because they didn't know what else to do. But everyone laughed. Everyone except me, who sat there with my skin literally burning, blisters forming on my arm, tears of pain and humiliation streaming down my face. I looked desperately at Michael, pleading with my eyes for him to do something to defend me, to stop this torture. He was staring at his plate, his face red, his fists clenched. But it wasn't anger at what was happening to me. It was shame. Of me. My own son was ashamed of me, not of the people who laughed at my pain, not of the wife who had purposely burned me. Ashamed of me for being so pathetic as to let this happen. Jennifer came closer, leaning down close to my ear while I was still paralyzed by the physical and emotional pain. Her expensive perfume filled my nostrils as she whispered with pure venom in her voice, "You are pathetic, Margaret. Nothing but a useless burden that no one here wants. Look around. Do you see anyone rushing to help you? Anyone offering ice, a cloth, anything? No, because no one cares. And you know what's worse? Look at your son. Look closely. He's dying of shame, not of me, but of you. You're the embarrassment here. You're the one who shouldn't be here." I looked around the table through the tears that blurred my vision. She was right. No one had gotten up to help me. No one had offered assistance. They just watched, some still smiling, others with uncomfortable expressions, but none doing anything. I was the evening's entertainment, the circus show everyone watched, but no one cared enough to interrupt. I struggled out of my chair, my legs shaking, my burned arm throbbing with a pain that made me nauseous. I walked to the door past the crowded room, and no one tried to stop me. No one asked if I was okay. No one offered to take me to the hospital. They just watched me leave as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I made it to my car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely put the key in the ignition. I drove the 20 minutes to my apartment with tears blurring my vision, having to pull over twice because was shaking too much to drive safely. The pain in my arm was unbearable. Every movement, every brush of clothing against my burned skin made me want to scream. When I finally got home, I ran to the bathroom and ran my arm under cold water. The blisters were huge, the skin red and shiny where it wasn't blistering. He needed medical attention, but he didn't have adequate health insurance. I'd canceled my best plan to save money after giving so much to Michael and Jennifer, and now had only a basic plan with a very high deductible. I treated the burns as best I could with the first aid kit I had at home. Burn ointment, bandages, painkillers that barely worked. I stayed up all night putting cold compresses on my arm, taking painkillers every hour, crying until I couldn't cry anymore. But the physical pain, intense as it was nothing compared to the emotional pain. My son had let this happen. He'd sat by while his wife deliberately burned me and humiliated me in front of strangers. I'd stood by silently while everyone laughed at my pain. And he'd been ashamed not of her, but of me. How had it gotten to this point? How had the sweet boy I'd raised, the one who used to hug me and tell me I was the best mom in the world, become this person the next morning? I woke up with my arm throbbing even more. The blisters had grown overnight, and the surrounding skin was inflamed and hot to the touch. I needed to see a doctor. I had no choice. I went to an emergency clinic where the doctor was visibly concerned when he saw my burns. These are severe second-degree burns. How did this happen? I accidentally spilled hot soup on myself. He didn't seem convinced, but he didn't pressure me. He cleaned the wounds, applied appropriate dressings, and gave me a prescription for antibiotics and stronger painkillers. The bill came to $800 even with my insurance. $800 I didn't have. I had to put it on my credit card, adding another debt to the already growing pile. I went home and lay in bed, unable to do anything but cry and stare at the ceiling. My phone rang repeatedly throughout the next day. Michael was calling. I ignored every call. He left voicemails. "Mom, where are you? Why aren't you answering? I'm worried. Call me." The messages were devoid of any acknowledgement of what had happened, any apology. It was as if the previous night hadn't happened. On the third day, when I still hadn't answered, he showed up at my apartment. He knocked on the door repeatedly until I had to open it. "Mom, what's going on? Why aren't you answering my calls?" I raised my bandaged arm. "That's why, Michael." He looked at the bandage, but didn't seem to grasp the seriousness. "Oh, you burned yourself with the soup. Jennifer said it was a silly accident." "Why didn't you call? We would have taken you to the hospital." "A silly accident." Jennifer had framed it as a silly accident, and Michael had bought the story without question. "It wasn't an accident, Michael. Jennifer bumped into me on purpose. And then everyone laughed. And you sat there embarrassed for me, not for them." He shook his head, clearly irritated. "Mom, you're being paranoid. Why would Jennifer do that on purpose? And of course, I wasn't embarrassed for you. I was just embarrassed by the situation that you had made a scene." Disbelief left me temporarily speechless. Had I made a scene? Was I the victim here, and was I being blamed for making a scene? "Michael, I've spent nearly $200,000 on you over the years. I sold my house, changed my entire life to be near you. And in return, I'm treated like a servant, constantly humiliated, and now physically hurt. And you don't see anything wrong with that?" He sighed that weary sigh as if I were a stubborn child who didn't understand anything. "Nobody asked you to do these things, Mom. You chose to give the money. You chose to move here. You can't just throw this in our faces now and act like we're in your debt." His words hit me like a punch in the gut. He truly believed this. He truly believed that all my help, all my sacrifices were free choices without any pressure or manipulation. "Did you know that if you didn't give the money, you would cut me out of your lives? Did you know that every time I hesitated, you made me feel guilty, that you made me feel like a terrible mother for not being willing to help nonsense? You always had a choice. Get out of here." He blinked in surprise. What I told him to get out of my apartment. Now, Michael looked at me as if he didn't recognize me. But after a moment, he turned and left, slamming the door behind him. I stood there in the middle of the empty living room, shaking from head to toe. In the following days, something inside me shifted. The pain, the anger, the sadness said, all crystallized into a cold clarity. I spent hours sitting, staring out the window, thinking about everything that had happened in the past few years. Every request for money, every humiliation, every disrespect. And I began to wonder if there was anything I could do, some way to regain even a little of my dignity. It was then that I remembered something important. Something I had completely forgotten in my grief and confusion. When Michael and Jennifer bought the house 3 years ago, there was a problem with the financing. The bank had only approved part of the loan because their proven income wasn't sufficient. Jennifer had become desperate, saying they would lose their dream home if they didn't find a solution. That's when the bank manager suggested they add a co-buyer, someone with a clean credit history and some equity. I had offered without hesitation. I signed all the documents and put my name down as co-buyer of the property. At the time, Jennifer had assured me it was just a formality, that as soon as their financial situation improved, my name would be removed. But my name never was. I went to the drawer where I kept my important documents and searched until I found it. The deed to the house. And there it was in black and white. Margaret Sullivan as Cooner of 50% of the property. Legally, That house was half mine. My heart began to beat faster as I processed what this meant. I kept searching and found more things. Joint account statements I had printed a few months ago before Jennifer had banned me from accessing it. Receipts of all the transfers I had made to them over the years. Emails and text messages where they had asked for money and promised to return it. I had proof. Proof of everything. The next day, with my arm still bandaged, but with a determination I hadn't felt in years, I went to a law firm specializing in family and real estate law. I scheduled an appointment with a lawyer named Daniel Harrison, who had excellent online reviews. When I walked into his office and began telling my story, showing him all the documents I'd brought, he leaned forward, increasingly attentive. "Ms. Margaret," he said when I finished, "you have an extremely strong case here. They exploited you financially in a clearly documented manner. And with your name on the deed to the house, you have significant legal rights to the property." The lawyer explained my options to me in detail. First, I could force a court-ordered sale of the house and receive my 50-50 share. Second, I could sue both Michael and Jennifer for elder abuse, which in Texas was considered a serious crime with potential prison time. Third, I could demand that my name be removed from the mortgage, which would force them to refinance, and considering the amount of debt they had likely accumulated, it would be nearly impossible to get approved, forcing the sale of the house. Each option had its advantages and consequences. But the most important thing he told me was this: "You have power, Ms. Margaret, real legal power, which they clearly don't realize you possess. The question is, how do you want to use that power?" I left that office with a proposal for legal representation and a strange feeling that took me a while to identify. It was hope. For the first time in years, I had hoped that I could change my situation, that I didn't have to continue being a victim. I decided to wait for the right moment. I wasn't going to simply sue them out of the blue. I wanted them to know. I wanted to see the realization on their faces when they discovered their pathetic, useless mother-in-law had more power than they imagined. I continued to pretend to be submissive, continued to not answer Michael's calls, but also continued to take no legal action. I let them think they had completely broken me, that they had won. Weeks passed. Then months. My arm healed slowly, leaving a permanent mark that reminded me every day of what had happened. But now when I looked at that scar, I didn't just feel pain. I felt determination. Jennifer eventually called me almost 2 months after the incident. Her voice was sweet as honey, completely fake. "Margaret, it's been so long since we've seen you. Emily's asking about Grandma. Why don't you come to dinner with us next weekend? She wanted something." I could hear it in her voice. But I agreed to go. When I arrived for dinner, Jennifer was strangely friendly. She offered me wine, asked about my arm with false concern, even complimented my dress. During dinner, the real reason for the invitation emerged. "Margaret, Michael, and I are thinking about taking a big family vacation. We're thinking about renting a beach house for a whole month. It would be wonderful. Emily would love it." I waited, knowing what was coming next. "But it's a bit expensive. We were wondering if you could contribute maybe $15,000. After all, it would be a family trip, and you're part of the family." I looked at Michael, who was staring at his plate, unable to meet my eyes. I looked at Jennifer with her fake smile. And something inside me broke free. No, the word came out firmly, clearly. Jennifer blinked as if she hadn't heard correctly. "Excuse me," I said. "No, I'm not giving you any more money." She let out an uncomfortable laugh. "Margaret, be reasonable. It's just a small contribution for a family vacation." "It's not small. And it's not a contribution, it's you asking me to pay for luxuries you can't afford. More importantly, I'm not part of this family. I'm treated like a maid and a punching bag. So, no, I'm not paying for your vacation." Jennifer blushed. Michael finally looked up. "Mom, you're being irrational." "Irrational? I've already given you almost $200,000. You've spent all the money I put into the joint account without my permission. You treat me with constant disrespect. And I'm irrational for finally saying no." I got up and grabbed my purse. But before I left, I turned to them. "Oh, and just so you know, I consulted a lawyer. A very good one, by the way. Turns out having my name on the house deed means I legally own 50% of the property. And I have documented proof of every penny I gave you, every broken promise, every instance of financial exploitation. The color drained from Michael's face. Jennifer went white as a sheet. You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't have the nerve. I looked at her with a calm I didn't know I possessed. Try humiliating me one more time and find out. I walked out of that house with my head held high for the first time in years. In the following days, my phone exploded with calls and texts. Michael called constantly, sometimes pleading, sometimes angry, sometimes trying to make me feel guilty. Jennifer sent messages alternating between anger and pathetic pleas. I ignored most of them. I wanted them to grieve a little, to feel the anxiety and fear they'd made me feel for so long. After a week, my lawyer called me. Ms. Margaret, I got a call from your son. He wants to negotiate. He and his wife are willing to discuss a settlement to avoid legal action. It's time then. I scheduled a meeting at the lawyer's office for the following week. Michael and Jennifer arrived 15 minutes late, both looking like they'd aged years. Jennifer wasn't wearing makeup and her clothes were wrinkled. Michael had deep circles under his eyes. We sat on opposite sides of a conference table, my lawyer next to me, and theirs who was clearly much cheaper on their side. My lawyer began presenting exactly what we had. Documentation of $147,000 transferred from my client to you over the past 4 years. Proof of joint ownership of the residence in question. Evidence of unauthorized use of funds from the joint account. And most seriously, multiple witnesses to the incident where Jennifer intentionally burned my client with boiling soup. This wasn't intentional, Jennifer began, but her lawyer put a hand on her arm to silence her. My lawyer continued. My client is prepared to take multiple legal action. Force the sale of the property and receive her 50% share. Sue for elder financial exploitation. And possibly press criminal charges for assault in the burn case. Their lawyer interrupted. But she's willing to negotiate, correct? My lawyer looked at me. Ms. Margaret, I looked at Michael and Jennifer. Michael had tears in his eyes. Jennifer looked like she was going to vomit at any moment. I have terms, I began. First, you will pay me back every penny of the $147,000 in monthly installments of $3,500 starting next month. Without fail. If you're late on a single payment, I'll resume legal proceedings immediately. Michael nodded frantically. Second, you will refinance the house to remove my name from the deed. If you can't refinance within 6 months, the house will be sold and I'll get my share. But Jennifer began silenced by a look from her lawyer. Third, and most importantly, I will have complete and unrestricted access to my granddaughter. No set schedules, no absurd rules, no asking for permission. I'll be able to see Emily whenever I want, take her on outings whenever I want, be a real grandmother. Michael nodded. Of course. And fourth, Jennifer, you will never disrespect me again. You will never make cruel comments. You will never humiliate me. You will never treat me like a servant again. You will treat me with the basic respect any human being deserves. If you break this agreement, the agreement is nullified and I will sue both of you. Jennifer looked like she wanted to argue, but after a long moment she nodded stiffly. Their lawyer asked for a moment to speak with his clients privately. They left the room for 20 minutes. When they returned, Michael spoke. We accepted all the terms. My lawyer prepared the papers right there and we all signed. It was official, legally binding. I had regained my power. As we were leaving the office, Michael stopped me in the hallway. Mom, wait, please. I stopped but didn't turn around. I'm so sorry. I'm truly sorry. I don't know when things got so bad when I became this person who let you be treated like this. I turned to look at him, his adult son who seemed so small and broken in that moment. Do you know when, Michael, the moment you chose money and comfort over defending your mother? The moment you decided it was easier to see me as the problem rather than face the fact that you married a cruel person. The moment you felt ashamed of me instead of those who hurt me. Tears were streaming freely down his face now. How do I fix this? Can I fix this? I don't know, Michael. I honestly don't know. But I can tell you this, it's going to take a lot more than apologies. It's going to take consistent action, real change, and you actually doing the work to understand how we got here. And even then, some things can't be fixed. Only lived with and learned from. I left him there in the hallway and walked away. The next few months were surreal. Michael began visiting me regularly without Jennifer, bringing Emily to spend entire afternoons with me in the park, in museums, baking cookies in my kitchen. He started therapy, something he admitted he should have done years ago. We really talked in a way we hadn't in years. And slowly, very slowly, I saw my son begin to come back. Not the boy he was that was lost forever, but a better, more aware, stronger man than he was before. Jennifer was more difficult. She adhered to the terms of the agreement rigidly and coldly. She never insulted me again, but she also never showed any genuine warmth. She treated me with an icy politeness that was almost as uncomfortable as the previous insults. But I didn't care. I didn't need her love. I just needed basic respect, and I was getting it. Emily, my sweet Emily, blossomed with more time with me. Now 3, she ran into my arms every time she saw me, showed me her drawings, told me secrets in her little child way. It was all I ever wanted. As for the money, Michael and Jennifer paid all the tuition religiously. They never missed a single payment. Within a year, I had already recouped $42,000. It was still a long way off, but it was happening. And Jennifer, surprisingly, or perhaps not so surprisingly, became pregnant again. When Michael told me, there was a moment of tension as he waited for my reaction. "Do you expect me to help financially again?" I asked, my voice firm. "No, God, no," he said quickly. "We won't ask for anything. I just wanted you to know you're having another grandchild. Great, I'm happy for you." The pregnancy seemed to change something in Jennifer. Maybe it was hormones, maybe it was the fear that I would actually sue them. If she broke the agreement, but she started to become slightly less hostile. Never friendly, but less openly antagonistic. And then something completely unexpected happened. A year and a half after we signed the agreement, Michael called me. His voice was strange, strained. "Mom, I need to talk to you. It's important. Can you come here?" I went, my heart clenched with worry. When I arrived, Michael was alone. Emily was at daycare, and Jennifer had taken the new baby, a boy named David, to a doctor's appointment. "Mom," I sat with Jennifer and we talked a lot. About everything. About how she treated you, about the problems in our marriage, about everything. I waited, not knowing where this would lead. We're getting a divorce. The words hit me like an electric shock. "Michael, you don't have to do this because of me. I didn't make this happen to destroy your marriage. It's not for you, Mom. Well, not just for you. It's for me too." I realized through therapy that I'd been in a toxic relationship for years. That Jennifer is manipulative and cruel not only to you, but to me as well. That I let her turn me into someone I don't recognize. And I don't want Emily and David to grow up seeing this kind of relationship as normal. The divorce was contentious and bitter. Jennifer fought for everything, trying to use the agreement we'd reached against me, painting me as a vengeful mother-in-law who destroyed the family. But the judge saw through it, especially when all the evidence of financial exploitation was presented. In the end, Michael was granted shared custody with a slight advantage, considering Jennifer had a documented history of cruel and manipulative behavior. The house had to be sold as part of the divorce proceedings. With the sale, I received my share plus $73,000. It wasn't everything I'd lost, but it was a large portion. Michael used his share to buy a smaller, more modest apartment where Emily and David stayed half the time. Jennifer returned to her hometown in another state, bitter but forced to accept the reality of the situation. Today, 3 years after that fateful Thanksgiving where everything exploded, my life is unrecognizable compared to what it was. I've regained not only my money, but my dignity, my self-respect, my voice. Michael and I have rebuilt our relationship. It's not perfect. It will probably never be what it was when he was a child, but it's honest and respectful. He continues in therapy, working on understanding the patterns that led him to accept and perpetuate abusive behavior. I see Emily and David regularly. I'm a present and beloved grandmother in their lives. Emily, now 6, doesn't remember much of the bad days, but David is growing up knowing he has a grandmother who loves him unconditionally. Most importantly, I learned valuable lessons that I will carry forever. I learned that love doesn't mean accepting abuse. That family is no excuse for exploitation. That generosity doesn't mean being a doormat. That having a good heart doesn't mean letting others walk all over you. I learned that power can lie dormant within us, waiting for the right moment to be activated. It was in documents I had signed, in laws that protected me, and evidence I had saved. But most of all, it was in my ability to say no, to set boundaries, to choose my own well-being. The scar on my arm is still there, slightly pink and glowing in the light. I touch it sometimes, remembering that terrible night. But I don't touch it with sadness or shame. I touch it with pride. Proud to have survived, proud to have fought back, proud to have reclaimed my life. If you're listening to this story and can relate, if you're in a situation where your love is being used against you, where your generosity is being exploited, where you're being disrespected by your family, listen to me carefully. You have more power than you realize. It may be in documents you signed, in laws that protect you, in evidence you can gather. But most importantly, it's in you, in your ability to say enough is enough, to stand up for yourself, to choose for yourself. It won't be easy. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. There were nights when I questioned if I'd done the right thing, if I should have continued to maintain the peace, even at the cost of my dignity. There were moments of guilt so intense I almost gave up. But every time I look in the mirror now and see a strong, dignified, respected woman, I know I made the right choice. Michael is rebuilding his life. You have a new job at a smaller but more ethical company. You're dating someone kind and respectful. Someone who has treated me with genuine warmth from day one. Emily and David are flourishing in a healthier environment. And me, I'm living. Really living, not just existing or serving or sacrificing until there's nothing left. I've gone back to school, taking literature classes at the local community college. I've made new friends with women my age who have gone through similar experiences. I've traveled to places I've always wanted to see but never could. I live for myself, and there's nothing selfish about that. A few weeks ago, Emily asked me a question while we were baking cookies together. "Grandma, why don't you and Mommy Jennifer like each other?" I stopped stirring the dough, thinking carefully about my answer. Sometimes dear people don't know how to be kind to each other. And sometimes when someone isn't kind to us repeatedly, we need to step back to protect ourselves. "But do you love her?" She looked at me with those big, sincere eyes. "I love you, my love. And I love your daddy and your little brother. And that's what matters." "And she just, Mommy Jennifer, wasn't kind to you." I shook my head. "No, she wasn't. But I learned something important. I learned that I don't have to accept being treated badly by anyone, not even my family. And when you grow up, I want you to remember that too. You deserve to be treated kindly always." She thought about it for a moment, then hugged me tightly, leaving flour all over my blouse. "I will always be kind to you, Grandma. I promise." That moment, that innocent hug, and that sincere promise was worth more than all the money I've lost and regained. It was worth more than anything material. When Michael came to pick up the kids later that day, he lingered at the door for a moment before leaving. "Mom, I just wanted to say thank you for not giving up on me even when I deserved it, for teaching me, even the hard way, what it truly means to have backbone and self-respect. I'm trying to pass those lessons on to Emily and David." I looked at my son, this man who was finally becoming the person he always had the potential to be. "Michael, we all make mistakes. The important thing is to learn from them and do better. You are doing better. And that's all I can ask for." Today, when I look back on everything that happened, I see a painful but necessary journey. I needed to be broken completely to rebuild myself stronger. I needed to lose almost everything to understand what truly mattered. I needed to face cruelty and betrayal to discover my own strength. And now, sitting in my small but comfortable apartment with photos of Emily and David on the wall with my scarred arm, reminding me of where I've been and how far I've come, I can honestly say I'm happy. It's not the perfect fairy tale happiness. I still carry scars, both physical and emotional. I still have difficult days where the sadness of all I've lost overwhelms me. I still question some of my decisions. But it's a real happiness built on a solid foundation of self-respect and healthy boundaries. It's a happiness no one can take away from me because it comes from within, not from external validation or self-sacrifice. If you identified with my story, if you saw parts of your own experience in what I shared, leave a like to help me reach more people who need to hear that it's possible to rise up, that it's possible to regain your dignity. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been through something similar? How did you deal with it? Your experiences might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Subscribe to the channel for more real stories like this. Stories of overcoming of strength of ordinary people who found extraordinary courage when they needed it most. Because we all have these stories, we all have these struggles, and sharing them makes us less alone on this journey. And always remember, you deserve respect. You deserve dignity. You deserve to be treated with kindness and consideration. If you're not receiving this from the people around you, including family, there's nothing wrong with stepping away, setting boundaries, and choosing for yourself. Self-love isn't selfish. It's survival. It's choosing to live rather than just exist. Thank you for listening, for being part of this journey with me, for being part of this community where every story matters. Your story matters. You matter. And never ever forget that.